Today we'll be giving a gameplay overview and review of the game Manhattan Project: Energy Empire. Hey everyone, I'm Tracy the Gaming Maven.
And I'm Stephane, the games teacher.
Are you looking to see what we're trying to do? Like you're looking for components, maybe looking for the setup, want to see what we think? Well, click on a timestamp below.
While you're there, subscribe to our channel to be notified when we post new content, and leave us a comment to let us know how we're doing.
We've got Energy Empire all set up and ready to go, so let's get to it. The objective of Energy Empire is to, well, build your empires of different types of energy. So you're going to be balancing between the better, more environmentally friendly geothermals against the slightly more polluted nuclear. After 6 rounds, the person with the most points wins the game.
All right, so here we have the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. I've got the components all laid out, and we're going to go through them quick. We have the game board, the 5 player mats and the player colors, the player components, which include, for each color, 6 worker tokens, 10 energy tokens, 2 scoring tokens, and 1 pollution token, which you start with at the beginning of the game. Over here we have the country cards, which are double-sided. So at the start of the game, each player will be dealt 2 cards and will choose one to play. I'm going to choose Canada because I'm Canadian. And the other side of the card is your player reference. Over here we have the plastic cubes. Yes, I said plastic twice because they are made of plastic, and in the game they represent units of plastic that you can use in order to buy different things. We have these really lovely resin oil drums, which you can see there. We have these metal I-beam tokens. They're not actually made of metal, they're wood, but they're painted silver, so I'll give them a pass. We have the various energy production dice. We have coins in values of 1 and 5. We have the science tokens. Here we have the pollution tokens, and the pollution tokens are double-sided. On the one side you have the pollution symbol, and on the other side they become toxic nuclear waste, which is really, really bad. Here we have the oil derricks, and we have here the achievement tiles, which will give you some opportunities for end-game scoring. On this side we have the global impact cards in green and red. The green ones come out earlier in the game and the red ones later in the game. The green ones generally are quite beneficial, and the red ones a lot less so. And then here we have the structure cards in government, industry, and commercial varieties. So that's all the components. All right, setup. So lay out the main game board and put out the player mats accordingly. Each player is going to get 2 country cards and choose between them. I've chosen here for player 1 Canada and here France for player 2. And their second card can just be used as a player reference. You can leave that out on the table. Each player will take their starting resources as per their country cards. So Canada here gets 2 oil, 1 metal, and 2 science. France starts with a yellow die, a science token, and 2 additional coins. Now the first player gets 0 coins to start, and then every other player in turn gets 1 additional coin. So the second player will get 1 coin, third will get 2, etc. So that's why France starts with 3 coins. Each player will get dealt 2 achievement tiles. They'll need to pick one and discard one back to the bottom of the pile. Do that here as well. Put it at the bottom of the pile. And then from the remaining achievement tiles, we will deal 3 face up onto the player board. Each player starts with 3 worker tokens and 2 energy tokens, you can see here. And they also start with 1 pollution token that is necessarily placed in the top leftmost space of their environment board. Continuing with the rest of the game board setup, each player will have round counter tokens. 1 goes on the United Nations track and the second one on the score track. We will put out a number of pollution tokens in each of these 6 spaces based on the player count. It goes up with more players. And then from each of the 3 decks of structure cards, we will deal out 3 face up, Here we have the government cards, the industry cards, and the commercial cards. So the last thing we need to do is put out the global impact cards. And of the stack of green cards, you'll draw 3, leave them face down for now, and then draw 3 from the red stack and also leave them face down. I'm just going to set these off to the side of the board for now, and I'll reveal them as we do gameplay. And now that everything's out on the board, we're ready to get started. So on your turn, you have one of 2 choices. You can either work or generate. And I'll go into detail as to what those represent now. In order to work, you will necessarily place at least one of your workers out on the game board on one of the appropriate action spaces. The green action spaces represent government actions, the brown action spaces are industrial actions, and the yellow action spaces are commercial actions. In order to play an action, you would simply place your worker on the appropriate action space, and then take the required resources or effects as per the plank. The actions above at the top represent buying cards, structure cards, from the appropriate bank of cards. And you would simply place your worker there and spend either the money or the resources that are depicted at the top in order to take the appropriate card that you want. And you would add that card. I'll just put it here. Actually, we'll put it here beside the player country, just as an example. You would immediately refill with another card from the stack. Those cards slide over, become cheaper, the existing cards, and then you refill the topmost space from the stack. Multiple players can take the same action, or even the same player can take the same action multiple times, but in order to do so, they always have to place one more worker or energy token than there are in the topmost stack. So for example, if the red player wanted to take the scientific research action again, or in this case maybe buy a card, that would make more sense, they would place an energy token and place a worker token on top of it, which would allow them to buy a card from here and place it near their player area. When they take the card, the cards are worth a certain number of victory points for end of game. And in this case, this card generates a nuclear waste pollution. So they'll take a pollution from the global impact track. They'll flip the token over so it's showing nuclear waste. And then they will add it necessarily here to an airspace. You can choose which column to put it in, but for now we're just going to put it in the leftmost column. And again, these refill. The different cards can be activated on your turn when you've placed a worker on the main board. If you still have remaining tokens left, you can activate any cards that are of the same color as the worker you placed on the board. So for example, if yellow were to take an action and spend 3 in order to get a worker, another worker, and generate a pollution token, we're going to do that. They will get the worker added. And because they placed in green and they have a green government card, they can activate that card with either a worker token or an energy token. In this case, I'll choose to use an energy token and take the appropriate effect, which is to trade in a science token to clean up 2 waste. And they remove the waste tokens back to the supply. Also on their turn, in addition to activating any cards that match the color of the worker you placed on the game board, they can also choose to activate their country card. And in this case, France would trade in a science and 2 coin in order to move up on the United Nations track. However, they have no science and no coin, so they can't do that yet. But if they did have the resources on their player mat, they would be able to take that action as well and move up appropriately on the United Nations track. The industry The industry section of the board includes this additional action space, which allows you to take the energy production dice and add them to your player mat. You can see that France over here already started with 1 yellow die to begin the game. Canada doesn't have any yet. So on your turn, you can place a worker there. And in this case, let's see, Canada has oil and metal. I don't have any plastic. I need plastic in order to take that action, but I can trade a metal in for either a hydrogeothermal die, which is the blue dice, or the coal dice. Now, any given player can grab any number of these dice. However, each player can only take a maximum of 1 hydrogeothermal die. So in this case, I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to trade my metal in order to take a blue die and add it to my player board. And in this case, I also need to draw a pollution token, which I'll take off the track, and place it on one of the land spaces. France is going to take an action to get some money because they want some money. And in this case, they can either take 2 coin directly, they can take 3 coin and every other player gets 1, or they can take 4 coin and every other player gets 2. In this case, France is going to be selfish and not give any money to any other player. No offense to the French. Now, the red player only has 1 energy token left. So necessarily, they cannot play any tokens out on the main mat because all of them require a worker. Red has no choice at this point but to generate. So how does generation work? Generation is pretty straightforward. The first thing is you may claim an achievement tile if you have at least 2 tokens remaining, 2 energy or worker tokens. In this case, Canada does not, and so they do not get to take an additional achievement token from the offer there. The next thing they look at is to return all workers to their player mats. So all the workers come back. Oh, wrong ones. I took yellow. I meant to take red. All the workers come back to their player mat, like so. And then all energy tokens wipe. So even the energy that they generated and didn't use, they lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it in this game. So in this point, they will then now choose to roll dice. So right now, Canada has 1 blue die that they can roll. In addition, they have these oil resources, and they can spend these oil barrels to get a temporary brown die per oil barrel they spend. Now there are only 4 brown dice, so if you have 4 oil barrels, you can grab all 4. Otherwise, you're limited by the number of oil barrels you have. So in this case, Canada is actually going to spend both oil barrels in order to take 2 brown dice and their blue die, and they're going to roll them all together. I'm just going to do that right here on the main board. Now, how do we resolve the dice? So there's a couple of things we need to know. The first thing we want to look at is the number of energy produced. And so the number of energy is the lightning bolts. So we'll simply grab, in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lightning bolts, and we'll add that many energy to our player board, and that's the energy we'll use in the next round. The next thing we need to look at is whether or not we generate pollution. So the way that works is we look at the numbers in the upper left corner of each die that's showing, and the die that rolled the highest number, in this case we have 2 dice that are tied, and I'll explain that, but the number that rolled the highest tells you whether or not you generate pollution or not. So here we have the blue die, which never generates pollution, and we have the same number on a brown die, which has a pollution symbol. Ties are decided by the player, and unless you have a strategy where you want to take pollution, you would generally choose not to pollute and add the token to your player mat. So in this case, Canada wants to not generate any pollution, so we will necessarily take 1 pollution token off the track, because we still want to move the global impact track forward and progress the game. But instead of putting it on my player board, I would put it in the supply. And that is the brown dice then go back to the supply for use by the next player. And that is the generate action for Canada. We have uncovered 1 spot on the global impact track. So the first of the 6 cards that we put out, remember we put 3 green and 3 red, so the first one will now be revealed face up and we'll resolve it immediately. So this one to start with, it shows that we will score the land, and so each player will score for their uncovered land spaces. So as long as there's no pollution tokens or oil rigs or oil derricks, you get to score that feature. So in this case, Canada, red, would score for land 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and France over here scores 5. The next thing that happens is it shows us which structure cards get recycled, and so they get wiped and removed from the game. In this case, the symbol is for the government cards. So these 3 cards will be removed from the game, and we'll refill them with 3 more cards from the stack. Finally, we resolve the text at the bottom of the card. And in this case it says, immediately in turn order, starting with the active player, each player may drill for oil as using the oil drilling location, board location. So each player has a choice whether they want to drill for oil or not. Drilling for oil allows them to take a oil token from the supply and cover either a land space, or they can choose to cover a water space, it's their choice, and immediately gain 3 barrels of oil from the supply. So now that we resolve that global impact card, play then proceeds to the next player. In this case, France now has the same situation where they could take additional actions because they still have a worker and an energy, but maybe they want to get one of these achievement tiles instead. So France is going to choose to pass and generate on their turn and follow the same steps that Canada just did, but because the first step is, because they have 2 tokens left over, they'll be able to grab one of the face-up achievement tiles and then refill after taking one. So when the final pollution marker is removed from the global impact track, we will immediately resolve the final global impact card. I'm not going to do that in this case, but you'll resolve the text appropriately as we indicated earlier. And then every player, including the player that triggered the game end, will then get 1 more action. After that, we'll move into final scoring. So final scoring includes points from the United Nations track. In this case, red would get an additional 12 points, yellow would get 17, plus because yellow's in the lead, they'd get a bonus 3 points. We would look at structure cards that players have accumulated throughout the game. In this case, red would have an additional 5 points, yellow would get an additional 2. We're going to look at achievement tiles. Yes, sorry. We're going to look at achievement tiles and see what achievements they've done and earn achievements appropriately. Now, you do have a maximum of 5 achievement tiles you can get throughout the game, and each achievement tile can generate a maximum of 5 victory points at end of game. So we'll look at the achievements and score those accordingly. We'll also score for the number of dice in your power generation track. So each die gives you 2 victory points. In this case, red would get 4 and yellow would get 4. And finally, we would look at the environment on the player boards, and each player would score for their environment. So for every space that is not covered by a tile, you would get 1 point. So here, red would get 11, and yellow here would get 14. In addition, if these columns are all free of tokens, so they're all open, you would get a bonus 1 point, 2 points, and 3 points respectively for a possible total of 6 additional victory points. And with those point totals, you have your final score, and the player with the highest score is the winner. And now we're ready to give you the review of the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. So, what'd you think?
The theme originally didn't quite appeal to me. I was like nuclear weapons and stuff like that. However, Energy Empire is more of a modern take on the whole process. So even if you were kind of not into that part of the theme, you can kind of really get into the rest of it because it's kind of a whole balancing act of the various types of environmental impacts you make with different types of resource creation.
I really enjoyed this game, the different ways to score points, the different paths you can take. I've tried different strategies every time I've brought the game to the table. And in the month and a half that we've owned the game, I think it's hit the table 7 or 8 times. We've really enjoyed this one.
So art and theme, just as we're just kind of mentioning that, the art in this is quite good, very nice looking. It's quite more modern because, like I said, the Manhattan Project, if you look at it, kind of got that more, nuclear bomb creation, that time, that era feel. This one's more modern. It's got slightly more varied color. It's not quite as, it's still gritty, but it's not quite as that, like as much as the other one. And but I find they've kept some of the old class, like the whole newspaper on the main game board. I like the player boards, and I like how you can do various things with it. You're going to affect your environment with certain things. You're going to be able to reduce your pollution using other aspects of it, and it all kind of ties in together to a very solid, cohesive theme, I find.
I really enjoyed the art in this, and the iconography is really simple and straightforward. So, not a lot of different icons you need to learn. There's the worker icons and the energy icons, and then the different action mechanics you can take. So I found it's, from a teacher's perspective, as I like to teach games, my name implies, I found this game really easy to teach.
Yes, surprisingly, despite how much is going on, it is a fairly easy to teach game. So components. What do you think of components?
I love the quality of the components. My only minor gripe, and this is a really minor gripe because the component quality is excellent. The cardboard is thick. We got nice custom resources. Would be the little metal bars. The metal bars are wooden, and I get that metal's expensive. It just, a few other games have done it, and maybe if, we'd gotten the extra blinged out Kickstarter version, maybe there would be, but you could always substitute with other metal components from other games as well.
And to be fair, I kind of definitely see where you're coming from, because the plastic is plastic and everything else, but the coins are cardboard as well.
Yeah.
And the thing is, most things that are metal in a game aren't like a custom shape.
True.
I like that they made it like an I-beam, so it looks very much like actual steel beams. And so I can kind of see, but that I think that would probably increase the price by almost like $10 just for that one component being like authentic metal.
But don't get me wrong, overall the component quality is fantastic. The cardboard is really thick.
Yes. It won't wear quickly.
Yeah, and really love all the custom components in this.
Especially since it gets played so much, I'm kind of glad things aren't wearing down very quickly. Yeah. So next we want to talk about game mechanics.
As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of different ways to score points in this game, which means you can end up with a number of different strategies. I myself have tried several different strategies when I've played, and I haven't found one that really trumps another. There was some question about the UN track. Maybe you want to talk about that?
Yeah, a friend of ours from Toronto, Mike Climo, had, because his first play game through, he was like, he noticed that, the people on the top of the UN track was the one who won, and he was curious on whether that affected things, because it was only his first gameplay. But at this point I had played it 5 or 6 times, but then I was very conscious about noticing that the last 2 or 3 times we've played, and sure enough, I think every time the person who wasn't on the top of the UN track actually won. Because even if they're on the very last spot and they get that extra 3 points as well, if everyone else is 1 step behind them, because everyone is allowed to be that last step, you're only 5 points ahead.
Still only a 5
point
gap.
You can easily catch that up. And I find some people don't even bother with the UN track at all. Like maybe they'll go 1 or 2 and they'll still win. And sometimes I've noticed, and this is what I find is it makes it a good game, is sometimes it can be really tight. Like we were literally like 5 points between first and last with a 4-player game once, and then another time it was like a 20-point difference because someone just had a really strong strategy against everyone else's strategy that wasn't necessarily not strong, but it was maybe not quite as cohesive or as smooth as that player's. So I like that it isn't always a tight game, but also isn't always like someone's going to be a runaway leader. And that I find, to me, usually represents a fairly balanced game, is that you can have that variability on how people end up scoring. And
mechanically, again, the game works. You have to put a worker token on the main board for your primary action, and then you can activate any number of other cards that match a specific theme or color. And also your country card. So, there's a number of different things you can do in a turn, but you always have to at least put that worker token. And if you run out of worker tokens, then your only option is to generate. So really, where you take all your resource or get your tokens back and go from there. So really, again, from a teaching perspective, it really makes this game a joy to teach, and everyone that we've shown it to has really enjoyed it so far.
Yes, very, very, very true. So, similar games.
Well,
you think the base is original. It is, but it's not really, right?
Similar iconography, similar theme, but the base game has some mechanics that are different than this one. They are in fact different games. It's not just like the Manhattan Project Redux. I prefer Energy Empire over the original. The original's still a great game, but I give the edge to the Energy Empire over the original.
Agreed. I didn't think it would be that much better. It's not like light years better. It's got that solid worker placement much more than like the end game condition for Manhattan Project is it's a race to a certain threshold. This game, it's more of a fixed rounds, and that usually tends to appeal to me more. I do sometimes enjoy the race, but it just felt like the fixed rounds kind of met with the whole gameplay mechanics, because you got to really build things up in this game. But yes, Manhattan Project is similar in a lot of ways.
I did find it was somewhat reminiscent mechanically of a Stephane Feld or even a Vital Lacerda game, where there's a lot of different ways to score points and different, almost like a bit of an engine builder where you have to take this action to take the next action and so on and so forth.
Agreed.
So, if you like those types of games, you'll probably really enjoy this one too.
Yeah, that's actually very true. Their games are very similar in this respect for sure. So general opinion, overall feel of the game.
Loved it. Playing it as often as I can. I will play this anytime anyone wants to play it. Happy to teach it as well, so I give it 2 big thumbs up.
Now this game is actually, I believe, on our 10x10 board, and I think we've already played it 10 times, or very nearly. We're almost there, so it's only April and we're already kind of getting that game done. So I'm just looking forward to playing it again and again, because I think it's going to be a great one. So again, 2 big huge thumbs up for me as well. So with all that being said, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Follow us on social media.